Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mitch Parker, for those of you that didn't attend the previous presentation, and I'm going to be talking about some work that I've been doing with a number of others in the new standards group IEEE/Underwriters Laboratories P2933, talking about building an open, extensible framework for the Internet of Medical Things. So this is our agenda for what we have today. We're going to first start with our learning objectives. Then we're going to talk about why we're here, talk about our end goals, talk about tips and what it is, what this group is, why am I here today, what are we trying to do, and what can you do to help us out. So moving on to the next slide, we have three key learning objectives. Number one, we're going to be talking about the security challenges that we have with the Internet of Medical Things, and this is going to further outline the aims of the P2933 group that we have developed to develop that standard framework, and then discuss why having a standard framework that addresses these needs is necessary to advance security. And of course, at the bottom, you will see the obligatory XKCD standards cartoon, which is more applicable than not these days, especially with the number of standards out there and how it can be a confusing mess sometimes. So why are we here? We have major issues. So we have a lot of devices out there being created and used, and they don't have due diligence for privacy and security. At the same time, we're also reinventing the wheel every time we have a new device, and literally it is reinventing the wheel. I spend a significant portion of my week doing third-party vendor analysis. As part of that, I talk to many of the vendors that sell us medical devices. And so one of the observations that I've made is that the existing architectural patterns that we have in the IoMT space don't accommodate for a lot of non-technology processes. They don't take a lot of real-world use cases into account, and I've had that conversation with numerous vendors over real-world use cases that we actually see on a day-to-day basis. And extensibility for the future is also a major concern, especially for a number of devices that have older operating systems, or more importantly, older forms of encryption, and also cybersecurity in the real world. So what I mean by that, and how this differs from real world use cases, is that cybersecurity in an actual hospital and the challenges we face there are a lot different than the tests that you have to do to be accredited by some standards body. So this leads us to having an engagement issue, and we need to have better engagement to improve security. So, of course, the obligatory cartoon as well, the obligatory meme, that's not how this works. This is not how any of this works. So what are the stressors that we face? So like I alluded to before, the current frameworks fall short in evaluating medical devices and IoMT for our real-world use cases. Our solutions need to be evaluated using multiple criteria sets. So what that means is that you'll be looking at an MDS2, you're looking at ISO certification, you're looking at high trust, and you've got paperwork overload. And also corresponding with that is the data and use case explosion, especially with the increase of intelligent systems and their constant need for data to train algorithms. So with this explosion of data and explosion of use cases, we have a need for increased security, and more importantly, data provenance to make sure that the data we're using to feed our systems to perform analytics is valid. And also along with this, we have rapid adoption of a lot of new technology, and like we've learned with COVID, we have to get this done quickly and get it out there on the floor. So there needs to be a better way, is what it comes down to. So what are the end goals for organizations? What are we looking for? We want a base architectural and security framework that our vendors and partners openly collaborate on that actually works. And we need to improve our communication and interoperability by using a common framework and language. And most important is once you've had all that built, take that real world guidance and use cases and incorporate them into a common standard that we all can use. So, nice picture of Fry. How did I get here? How did I get here? 2018, I gave a presentation at HIMSS on RFID security. And A couple months after that, my organization was starting the RFP for a very large enterprise resource planning system that used some modern technology. So we developed some security standards around blockchain to address some security concerns we had discovered with those. We call those the IoMT blockchain security standards. And I was introduced to a woman named Susan Ramanat, who she is the CEO of Spiritus Partners out in Scotland. Her husband is a man named Bob Clint, and he's their CTO. He was actually in the area, stopped by my office in Indianapolis, and we sat down, started talking, and he called a friend of his up from my office named Florence Hudson. We had a conference call, and she got me involved in some IEEE pre-standards work. And I was one of 22 contributors to the IEEE Standards Association pre-standards workstream report on clinical IoT data validation and interoperability with blockchain. Because again, it had an interest for me in data provenance and making sure that data coming from clinical systems was accurate, coming from the system to its ultimate destination or being used in the clinical decisioning process. And also Florence's excellent article, Enabling Trust and Security, Tips for IoT in the IEEE IT Professional magazine, kickstarted a lot of this work. So what is TIPS? What's this algorithm I keep telling you about that I haven't explained to you yet? So from the IEEE IT Professional, March, April 2018 issue, it stands for 6 different things. Trust. Allow only designated people or services to have device or data access. Identity. Validate the identity of people, services, and things. Privacy. Ensure device, personal, and sensitive data are kept private. Protection, which is to protect devices and users from physical, financial, and reputational harm. Safety, which is to provide safety for people, devices, and infrastructure. And finally, security. Maintain the security of data, devices, people, and so on. And so I also throw integrity in there as well. So this is the draft architectural framework we came up with. And as you can tell, we start off with the end user interface, where people use the system, who the actors are, and move down the stack down to the data sources and targets themselves. And on the right, you will see a lot of the work we've done for base technologies, starting with security and encryption to make sure that that data is accurate and has integrity throughout the entire stack. So there's a lot to digest here. The IEEE paper is pretty huge. But what it led to was the creation of an IEEE Working Group sponsored by IEEE's Engineering and Medicine and Biology Society Committee, and later Underwriters Laboratories, to establish the standards for this framework for clinical IoT data and device validation and interoperability. So this includes our wearable clinical IoT, interoperability with healthcare systems, including EMRs and EHRs, other clinical IoT devices, hospital devices, and we're talking even things such as building management systems and HVAC, and future devices and connected health systems. And future devices is very important to me because when I first started off at IU Health, I met with our executive team. One of our regional presidents at the time asked me, she goes, "Mitch, I'm building a new hospital. How are you going to secure the new hospital?" I said, "I don't know what technology you're going to have. However, we need to make sure that the technology that we have, even though it hasn't been invented yet, that we're going to know how to secure it. So we need to make sure that we do our due diligence," which we did. So what's the purpose of what we're doing? We want to enable secure data sharing and connected healthcare via an extensible business technical architecture. And again, I will tell you some of the discussions we've had. We're using a superset of the TOGAF framework in standards development to assist with this. We want to improve healthcare outcomes as part of this, make sure we protect our patient privacy and security, and develop that set of guidelines and standards to standardize the use of these devices for precision medicine, also for intelligent systems, data sharing, interoperability, and security. And you're nothing without goals, and ours are to have goals of improved and measurable healthcare outcomes, because you've got to have a purpose for doing everything, and that's ours. you're not doing anything good if you're not making the world a better place, or at least improving someone's health. So who are our stakeholders? First of all, even though they're down towards the bottom, patients and patient advocates. That's just a point on the slide, but they're always number one. Medical device manufacturers, the hardware, software, and service developers for the users of connected healthcare, payers and providers, and regulatory agencies. So again, as someone who is not only been a patient, but also has children that have been, I consider this very, very important. So this is also a diagram Florence Hudson developed that was in an IEEE publication. So tips for the Internet of Things that talks about everything I just talked about in the previous few slides. Nice diagram that discusses how and where everything fits. So who are the leaders of this crew? Our chair is Florence Hudson. Our company is FD Hint International, which is her initials. And our co-vice chairs, it's William Harding, who is a distinguished technical fellow at Medtronic, and myself. And our secretary is Ken Fuchs, who is the Director of Standards and Process Management for Draeger Medical Systems. Our IEEE program manager is Tom Thompson, and our UL program manager is Diana Pappas Jordan. So here's some statistics for you to talk about the magnitude of this group. We have over 220 participants from 22 countries across 6 continents, and we've had them all on a conference call at the same time. And we've got representatives from providers, the med device manufacturers, a lot from academia, a lot from government, a lot from regulatory, some EMR and EHR companies, several security vendors, several networking vendors, and actually even some payers. We do have monthly calls with the main group. We have 8 subgroups holding their own calls, and they all do report out on the monthly call. We also do executive level report outs to the IEEE Engineering, Medicine, and Biology Society and the IEEE Blockchain Steering Committees to let them know what we're working on and what our current status is. So why am I here today? We want to provide you an opportunity to participate. We want to discuss what areas we're addressing as part of the standard, and to discuss the interoperability that we have with other IEEE groups, underwriters laboratories, ISO, HIMSS, NIST, and numerous other standards. So we have an 8 subgroup structure: trust and identity, privacy, protection and safety, security, data validation and interoperability, device validation and interoperability, intelligent systems design, that was in that meeting this morning, and use cases and scenarios, including human factors. So the mantra of our trust and identity group is to ensure the trust and identity of humans, devices, and things. And I'm not going to sit here and read the rest of the slide for you. However, we are very concerned about patient, device, physician, clinician identity, and also publisher and subscriber identity. Because one of the other items that we had found is that there's a lot of data interchange that occurs in the process of using devices that isn't verified and validated, and this is our attempt to help make sure we give identity to those. Privacy, we want to make sure that device, personal, and sensitive data is kept private, and this is a challenge for us because of the international scope, especially with GDPR, CCPA, and HIPAA and high-tech, so we have to be very circumspect and focus on privacy standards that are more general, that can be applied across multiple international standards. Protection and safety, we care about designing this in and making sure we have it for ongoing use. And this addresses a gap that we've noticed with information risk / information security and clinical risk and quality. And we want to make sure we put this in the correct scope for designing protection in systems and making sure we have continued safe usage of them. And obviously with security, ensure cybersecurity for clinical IoT data, devices, and systems. Make sure we have that good triad of the CIA triad: confidentiality, integrity, and availability, and make sure we recommend processes and procedures for operationalizing it utilizing a number of existing standards, especially the ISO IEC 27001 and 2 standards, UL 2900 2-1, and the NIST standards, plus also other IEEE, ISO, and UL standards. Now, the reason we had 2933 as our number is because when we talked to UL, we wanted to make this something that added on and built upon the great work that's already been done in UL 2900 2-1. So that's where we ended up with that number, was to honor the work that's already been done and build upon it. And also data validation and interoperability. This includes data quality, integrity, and transparency, because one of the big challenges, I talked about this earlier, has been with electronic data interchange. It's a technology from the 1960s, and we really haven't evolved outside of encryption how to protect that data. And we want to make sure that we build upon the existing standards. And this is the meat of what we're doing. Make sure the data that we're using is valid, can be verified, and most importantly, provides that good provenance between its point of collection and its points of usage, specifically for use in the electronic medical record and also with intelligence systems. And also making sure that we can build good, transparent processes that people can use as well. So we want to address a lot. But again, you have to start somewhere, and one of the areas you start with is you have to change how we do data validation and interoperability. We're doing it the same way since literally the 1960s. And of course, with devices, we have to make sure that the devices we use have good device validation, authentication, and interoperability, which is something that we've really needed to do in the IoMT space. And we need to get some good standards in there. And we've got people from the ISO 11073 group working with us.
I was first, but
See
I
first.
filled up all my food.
Isabel, please go, girl. Daddy's doing a presentation. My apologies, sir. So we have a lot of work that we're doing. And yes, you all heard what happened to my daughter at school. So it brings us to intelligent systems design, which includes a lot of architecture and overall interoperability work, making sure we have a good design scope, and making sure that we build a good framework to build on top of tips to have excellent intelligent systems design and ethical usage of AI and ML, and also explainability and transparency of such. Which brings us to use cases and scenarios, because we have to make sure we take those into consideration with everything we design, because you can't design a standard and not take how it's going to be used into consideration, because the second you have that disconnect, people don't use the systems. We want to make sure people use the standards, use the systems, and make sure we design something that meets what people need. And there's something we had a good talk on our leadership team last week about, which was when we take a look at use cases, don't always take a look at the successful use cases, look at the failures as well, because you're not going to learn just from successes. You're going to learn from failures. So we take a lot of use cases out there, we look at them, we don't look at what can go wrong. And it's okay to look at what goes wrong, because if you don't think about that, you don't think about how a system can fail, then you can't design a standard for what to do when it happens. And not everything's always going to be successful, which leads us to making sure we design for real life. So here's references I used to actually work on this presentation. And here's some of the related UL and IEEE work that we've also referenced. So I've been doing a lot of work with blockchain governance. The reason why I've been doing work with P2933 is because they are taking a lot of work at multi-party consortia, and I think they've done some excellent work there. P2418.6 we've done some work with in blockchain, healthcare, and life sciences, because there's been a lot of excellent work over DSCSA, Drug Supply Chain Control Act, and we think that there's a lot we learned from the implementations that they've done there. And we also do share information with the cybersecurity subgroup. And also, like I mentioned, we have several members of ISO IEEE 11073 working with us currently And same thing goes for UL 2900-1. We have members of those groups that we are working with, and we enjoy working with them. So had to put the photo of the middle school dance here because that seems to be a current state that we're in. So this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to avoid this. And the only way you do it is by actually getting out there and doing the work. So we have 5 good aims. Number 1, actively collaborate to establish these good shared standards. Number 2, which is use quantitative standards to establish security. So in other words, put something in place where we have a good quantitative set of controls we can use to say, yes, what we're putting in has a reasonable and appropriate degree of security for the given business and technical architecture. And also to develop the technical leaders who understand how to implement this and improve others. So we look at leadership as also being a key component as well to any kind of standard you develop. Because if you don't have people that understand how to implement these or understand the why, you're never going to get it done right. And I don't look at us being improving via questionnaire or certification overload. However, via shared ownership of good standards with good quantitative demonstrations of it, yes, we're going to be able to do so. So what can you do? What's the outcome of why I'm up here today talking to you with the occasional interruption? We'd like you to join, and we'd like you to work and collaborate with us as we develop the standards over the next couple of years. So with that, I'm going to open myself up for any questions. Leave this up here on the screen. You can find me. This is my email. This is my Twitter, P2933 website. And for more information, please visit the website. I put a screenshot, but there's a lot going on, so more than likely would have changed. I would have given you all the information. So thank you very much again for the opportunity, Richard, and I'll open up for any questions if there are any.
Thank you very much, Mitch, for sharing your insights there. It sounds like you guys are being very busy for the foreseeable, will be busy for the foreseeable future on this particular project. So thank you. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I don't, excuse me. I don't see any questions coming up in the Q&A. If you do have questions for Mitch on this very important topic, please feel free to post them there. And if there is a bit of a delay on the Q&A we found today, so apologies for that. Questions are coming up, you know, sometimes half an hour after the speaking session is finished. So Zoom is obviously pretty loaded up today. So apologies for that. I guess everyone else had the same idea of putting something similar on to us or other sessions on today on the Zoom webinar platform. So with that, Mitch, I'm going to say thank you. If there are any follow-up questions, I will be sure to mail them to you and put you in touch with whoever is asking those questions.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, Richard, and thank you all very much for attending.
It's always great to see you, Mitch. Thank you.
Thank you.